All right, everybody. So this week we are talking about Podcast Junkies. This is actually going to get very meta. This is a podcast that interviews podcasters. And so we are now a podcast that listens to podcasts, listening to a podcast about a podcaster who interviews podcasters. And so let me just read a little bit from Harry Duran's site, Podcast Junkies. Since 2014, Harry Duran has had over 310 conversations and counting with some of the most fascinating podcasters in the podosphere. His relaxed conversational format allows guests to kick back their heels and share valuable and sometimes personal insights of their podcasting journey. And the episode we listened to today would be episode 320, Jack Reiseter, and I know it was in the episode, I'm not sure I even pronounced that correctly, Exploring Digital Frontiers, a journey through technology, podcasting, and privacy. So we talked format-wise, everyone, about listening to a little clip to start out the episode. And so let me just share my screen. This is where we might have to do a little editing, Nicholas. I'm going to share my screen, share sound. So this is actually a clip that was automatically selected in our Eddy tool. So I'm going to hit play, and we'll just listen to it first.
And are you still surprised that it looks like you're at 133 episodes in so far, but in terms of the ability to find stories, or is it just because we're so connected, there's more people online, there's more people trying to take advantage of people that you feel like you'll never run out of stuff to talk about?
I'll never run out of stuff, that's for sure. There's endless stories there. The cybersecurity news is just flowing every day. And it's crazy fascinating how much is going on. I mean, you got North Korea hacking into Bangladesh Bank for $1 billion, right? Like trying to steal that. You've got NSA hacking into other countries and taking over networks and stuff. And then you have teenagers just attacking each other and, hitting Minecraft servers or something like that, and then of course there's money to be stolen, and it's just endless stuff. But what's kind of progressed through the time is, at first nobody knew who I was. So I was, tapping on a lot of shoulders. Hey, can you come talk on my show? And like mostly crickets, but every now and then it would be, oh, okay, sure. But now I've kind of established myself. So now it's the opposite. People are approaching me saying, I don't know who you are, but I just got out of prison and I've been told to talk to you.
All right. Did that come through the audio?
Yeah, actually.
Yeah, we didn't just sit in silence for a minute.
Okay, cool. Well, cool. So first, I'd just like to see, get everyone's general feedback on the show.
Well,
really
right off the
warm.
bat, yeah, I was gonna say, like, he had a really warm personality, which was awesome, and the clip itself was really well plucked out. Like, if I had to pull a clip from that episode, that probably would have been the one.
Interviewing people that just get out of jail, like that's just catchy right there.
Yeah, it had the makings of a good podcast clip. They talked about North Korea, kids just attacking each other, and people getting out of prison. It's the three big facets of a good story.
And Minecraft, you can't forget Minecraft.
Yeah, and Minecraft. Exactly.
One thing that kind of struck me was they were talking at one point about all the different privacy and security stuff, and they just talked about so much tech stuff, and then they talked about, like, maybe it's good to go outside sometimes. And they were like, yeah, I go outside and ride a bike and play guitar.
That's actually why I'm sitting outside. I just listened to the episode.
I'm looking outside, like, inspired to, like, go play in my yard.
No, I thought they both had warm personalities. I agree with Nicholas. I actually wish it was longer. Usually I was getting through it and I was like, I didn't want it to end. It ended abruptly, and I wanted to dive into some more of the stories about the guy who took off because he was busted and took a boat on the Caribbean Sea and hopped on a cruise ship and got busted. I mean, it seems like a lot of really cool stories that this guy's covered, and it was definitely a teaser for the show. I want to listen to some more.
Yeah. I really liked that, like, it was just a conversation about the show. It didn't feel like I was being sold anything at any point. You know what I mean? Like, I think sometimes when you have an interview, it's really easy to be like, oh yeah, the new project is super great. I did this, and that. And it's like, no, this was a lot more organic and natural, which is like kind of the appeal of podcasting in a lot of cases.
It's natural. So, it was like the guys were sitting on the couch having a beer together, really.
Yeah, exactly.
It reminded me, specifically, like, the beginning, it reminded me of, like, New York Times, just a column from somebody, the guy just talking about, like, oh yeah, I wanted. Oh wow, there's just a deer that's just walking through my yard right now, and I'm gonna give you a very specific description of what is happening around me in my house, what everything looks like, and then there's this deer, and then like I thought that was like gonna be part of the podcast, but that was like his intro, and like if you listen to other episodes, like his intros are actually really compelling, and I actually subscribed because of like the beginning of it.
For sure.
Yeah,
It reminded me of. Oh no, you go, Max.
Oh, sure. Yeah, Harry's definitely a pro podcaster. I think he's been in the game for a long time. Like he's got the format totally dialed, and
Great
it
voice.
sounds like the early podcasts, like when I don't know how long he's been doing it actually, but it just sounds like those classic types of formats, and everything's like completely done exactly how you'd want to do it for that audience. So yeah, I thought it was super
since 2014, 300
2014,
episodes.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Coming up on 10 years.
It's like watching a classic movie, like you know exactly where it came from, and you know like what this guy has been doing this entire time, and it's like he just loves this and just keeps going with that same format.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I mean, what I was going to say was like his intro really reminded me of like WTF with like Mark Maron. Because like a lot of those just start with him just like, yeah, so this is what's happening in my life. Glow got canceled on Netflix and I'm never going to forgive them for that, stuff like that.
Yeah, I feel like it's that type of show for a different audience. His show is obviously by the name, Podcast Junkies. It's very like insider industry, but I feel like has a lot of his guests are people within the industry just making podcasting happen. And then actually had never listened to Darknet Diaries before, which is the guest Jack's show, but that I've heard of that show for so long. I feel like it's a really big podcast in podcasting as well. And so I finally ended up listening to an episode because this was like a good reminder to be like, oh yeah, that exists and it sounds right up my alley. So I gave it a listen to that, and that's a really amazing podcast too. So I already knew Podcast Junkies, but now I've got a new podcast on my list, which is Darknet Diaries. And this is the other type of classic podcast. I feel like the investigative journalism, almost like auteur style, where he's like not a journalist, but he dives super deep and has all those great stories. So that was a lot of fun to dive into that as well.
Yeah, I need to like actually go ahead and subscribe myself, because like just listening to him talk about stuff really sold me on it. He did this like whole extended thing where he was talking about like his history with like getting into like the dark web and like hacking and stuff, and he was talking about like early web 2.0. And even though I am not old enough to remember like the .com boom internet, like just hearing him talk about it made me go like, yeah, I could probably listen to this guy talk for a few hours every week.
I felt the same way because I came like my memories of the internet started in like 1998, Netscape Navigator, that whole thing, like in my elementary school. So them talking about that like piqued my interest so much, and just like my head was just flooded with like memories of like early internet.
For sure. Yeah, and it was just kind of cool. Like he was talking about those Wild West days where it was like, oh yeah, every major internet company had their own version of the internet. Like you had the AOL network, or like the thing that I remember distinctly was like Yahoo was its own thing. Besides the fact that Yahoo was like a relevant company, it had its own news outlet, it had its own communications network, and all of these little things, and you just went to Yahoo's little internet. So like hearing him talk about that, it made me curious, because it just like, it's something that I'm not like lucidly familiar with, because again, I was way too young for it. But at the same time, I also feel like it was just something that I could get insight into through hearing about his experiences.
Do you guys want a little clip from the episode? Because it just so happens that Eddy selected the clip where they're talking about the AOL stuff. Let's just bring it in.
Please.
Yes,
let's
please
bring it in.
That
Play it
Oliver
for
and I are
everybody,
probably
Oliver, do it.
old enough to remember.
I remember too much.
I remember the dial-up AOL.
My sister and I used to do a dance to it when we were kids.
So let's start here. This is the beginning of that AOL clip.
Yeah, I think my grandma somehow got a computer,
Okay.
which was expensive and high tech, and I don't know why she was dabbling in it, but she was just like, "Oh, I'm gonna try one of these," and I was like, "What's going on with this?" And I got into it. Right, I was
Yeah.
playing video games on there. I was learning to type. Eventually, we got AOL and got online, and I just was in love. So I think I was curious about it, and it was kind of a fun toy before the internet. But then once we got AOL and it connected to the internet, I fell in love with computers, and I've been in love ever since. It's always just like so cool to just connect to the whole world and share ideas and see what everyone else is doing. It's amazing.
All right, so there's a little clip from
That's
there.
exactly how I feel. Like he talks about it like my love for the internet, my love for computers. Like he sounds like he's got hearts in his eyes when he's talking about it.
Yeah. Did anyone else hear just like the tiniest bit of video killed the radio star while he was talking about it? Just like the tiniest bit of romance in there?
Yeah, a little bit.
I don't know.
The one thing that kept coming to mind in this episode for me, especially since grandmas were mentioned in that clip, is the meme that's been circulating like this year about the grandma telling her grandchild about how like, oh, back in my day, we used to connect to the internet through the phone cable and it sounded like screaming robots. And
right, grandma.
Yeah, sure, grandma.
It's like, what's a phone cable?
Back in my day, we used to hoard AOL trials like they were gold. Yeah. Okay, Graham.
Yeah, the internet came on a CD-ROM.
Yeah.
How did they? I've always been curious. Was that just like a data? There was like it was a code for amount of data that you could use it, like on like an actual technological level. I'm not even sure how that works.
So my understanding is that it's exactly that. It's literally just data being passed through your phone line, which is why like before we had Web 2.0, there were other like internet like services. In the early 90s, you could actually check like the stock market on your TV using a keyboard, but it was the same basic idea. Likewise, like early video game consoles could download DLC, or what we now call DLC, by running a phone line into your console.
Okay, that's so Wild West. That is so Wild West Web 2.0. That's so fun.
Sounds like a fax machine.
Yeah, like fax.
Yeah, it's basically a fax machine.
I know if my internet's slow, I turn my router back on and off, and then it normally fixes the problem.
Alyssa, what is your earliest internet like memory?
Probably, I mean, we always had the internet when I was in school. I'm 24, so like it was just always there. Probably either Webkins or we had like the AR book club, and we would we'd go on and go to the little like AR reader, whatever thing. And then you would take questions, like little quizzes on whatever you read. And I distinctly remember that our school would like read it over the PA system, like the rankings of like the top 10 kids per class. And I was reading Harry Potter in like 3rd grade. And everybody was like giving me so much grief because they're like, you don't have any AR points. And I was like, took the test of like 3 books at once, and I was like way up in the rankings. So
that was for simpler times.
Yeah, I miss it. And then you got like stickers and like pixie sticks and stuff. Oh man, bring back the AR. That's all I gotta say.
Do we have a company AR, Oliver? I
don't even know what that
spotlight
is
right now.
Yeah, I'm not even sure what any of that is. So it's like weird.
I'm too old.
Accelerated reading. I mean,
accounts receivable.
Something. Yes, that.
That's.
I mean, we sort of have that.
Yeah, we have that.
Christy, when you asked that question to Alyssa, I was just thinking, Christy, what's your first memory of air?
Well, their album, Oliver, the one with the trip to the moon for the cover.
Moon Safari.
Yes,
I think
that. I'm so happy someone got that.
I think it's probably time to kind of move on to the next section of our podcast. I want to say one thing. I mean, if anyone wants to share any last thoughts, absolutely. But first, I just want to say my overwhelming thought was that as I listened to this was like, damn, Harry is a pro. We have a long way to go. He's so good.
His voice. I think it's absolutely his voice, and like the structure. It's just beyond. As a person who's trying to start a podcast, I listened to this going, oh, so that's what it sounds like when you're like nailing it every time.
Yeah,
His voice.
and it's 320 whatever episodes, so we have a long way to go for sure. One question I want to ask everyone, this is kind of like just a random question, but like, what playback speed did you listen to it on? Or in general, do you listen at 1x or do you listen at something faster?
I was
Or
at
slower, I
1.5x because I did it like half an hour before this, and I was running late. So
1.5x, man. I think that like if I could go faster, I would. I want to consume as much as I can, as fast as I can.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. I listened at 1.5 speed. I usually don't. And if it's like a comedy podcast or like a storytelling podcast, I'll listen at 1x speed because those are like intrinsically tied to the actual content. I
listen to it at the speed that they recorded at because I can't retain anything if I don't hear it at whatever pace it is. I don't know. Is that 1? Is that 0?
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah, fair enough.
That's 1.
Too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Usually I do
1.
too, but I was in a hurry. Trying to get
0 is just if you hit the stop button. I think. I'm not 100%
negative.
sure on that.
Can that be a feature request for play?
Yeah, 0x.
Yeah, I want to see what kind of backmasking they're doing. If it's like a Beatles record or something.
Play it backwards. Sgt. Pepper's.
Yeah. Which, by the way, I'm just gonna, with everyone's permission, I think we should absolutely include a little Easter egg for someone like that eventually.
We could absolutely do that. We could say something about Paul, whatever.
Yeah. Or Paul McCartney or whatever people call him.
All right. Anyone else want to add anything there?
I'm a strict 1xer. I feel like there's a whole debate about this, but personal choice is like I want to listen how they intended it. I do kind of feel like it's like watching a movie on 1.5x or something. Seems weird to me. Listening to a podcast feels the same. So religious 1xer for me.
I will say that I listened at 1x for this one, but it was mostly just because I wanted to hear the timing and then the way that they're delivering things. Any time I'm normally listening to a podcast on my own, it's at 1.5.
Mm-hmm. One thing, I listened to this at 1.5. Go ahead, Nicholas.
No, I was just gonna say I definitely agree with what Max said. I just happened to have picked 1.5 this time.
I found it funny. So I listened to 1.5x I had enough time, but I was kind of running late. But I was like, you know what, let's just like get through it so I can think about it. And I found like 1.5 was nice for getting all the info. But the part of it that was weird is like, usually I picture, whether or not I know what the person looks like, there's like a mental image of the person in my head. And if it's like 1.5x, the person is always like kind of like thinner in my head because they're speaking a little higher pitched and like faster. So like then when you slow it down, you're like, oh yeah, this is what this person actually sound like. So I think it's just kind of like something that's fun to play with too, but it definitely feels a little different when it's sped up. But yeah. So anyhow, here we go for the next round. So we had in the newsletter, we put out a call for people to submit their podcasts for us to review and talk about, and we got more submissions than we could ever get to. It's over, I think we're at about 450 right now. And so I'd like to try to listen to every single one, maybe not the whole episode if we can, but there could be a way there. I was thinking there might be a way for us to consume the podcast and talk about it even just a little bit. So I would like to share my screen again.
And for the record, this isn't listening to all these shows at 10x speed, right? I think we've just established that's a no-no.
We listen to 10x speed and then we all talk at once.
I was wondering how you were going to do it. This is cute.
This is wonderful.
Yeah. So yeah, Nicholas and I talked about this, and Alyssa and I talked about this a little yesterday. And we've created the Headliner podcast wheel. So there are 13 submissions on here, and we're going to spin the wheel, and then we're going to preview a clip from the episode. Running out of time.
I need a banker up one.
The cottage, here. What?
Yeah. Okay. So we're gonna listen to a clip, and we're gonna give our hot takes after listening to a pretty short clip from the episode. So here we go. It's spinning.
Oh, the sound is so cute.
All right, we'll be listening to a clip from Behind the Dreamers. All right, so now I'm going to go in here. This is in Headliner. Which one is Behind the Dreamers? There are so many podcasts in here. So the clip we'll be listening to is from an episode called In the Ring with Tony Mack, Conquering Obstacles and Achieving Success. So we're going to go over to our share page right here. And this is an automatically created clip. I want to warn you all, I have not listened to this clip yet, so it is going to be new for all of us. We take risks on the Headliner PodPod.
It was just for rugby players. Guys from Australia moved here to try to start a rugby facility, but the business wasn't doing good. And so someone asked me to be like, hey, Tony, besides you going to go get your own location, why don't you ask to go move in to another gym and start fresh?
Yeah.
And ask them to help build up build your business in someone else's business, till you get started.
Yeah.
And then they end up working and I started with like 1 or 2 bags.
Gotcha.
Started with like one member.
One member, yeah.
And I just kept staying consistent, and then eventually the den sold it to Greg, McCoy, which ended up being my business partner, and we ended up building this together.
I like it.
Yeah.
I
And
like
so that's
it.
how it started. That's how the fitness journey started.
That's awesome. Well, and you talked about, I want to back up just a little bit because you
Sorry, I
talked
just-
no,
yeah.
this is good. No, we need all this, but I want to
This is
back
me
up.
talking sometimes.
Yeah,
Stop.
no, it's good because they need to hear all this.
All right, so
I
that's a
love
clip.
how it ended with they need to hear all this.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
That's
actually
So I guess-
really well
great
timed.
end to it. Ugh.
Question, what do you guys all think this podcast is about?
I think that it's about it's an interview style podcast, so they're taking people that have actually made their their dreams come to fruition, and they're like business owners or like entrepreneurs or something. But it sounds like this dude opened up a gym and she's like interviewing him about his whole dream and how he made it come to fruition.
What do you think their tags are on YouTube?
Entrepreneur?
Just
I
the
don't know.
lyrics to that Wiz Khalifa
Interview.
song about winning.
I think Alyssa's guess sounds pretty good. I do have the actual description pulled up. Does anyone else want to hazard a guess, or should we reveal what the actual podcast description
Sounds like
is?
Tony
think
Mack
that's
opened a
absolutely it.
boxing gym.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
so let me read. This is Behind the Dreamers by Jennifer Loading. We are talking to the achievers, the creators, the magic makers, and the dreamers. These are our friends, these are your friends, and they are living the extraordinary. So, in this episode, it is Step into the Ring with us as we host the indomitable Tony Mack, a retired professional boxer turned thriving business owner. Pretty good hit rate from that clip. Should we do
I see we're
another?
1 for 1.
Let's go back to the wheel. All right, girl means business. Let's go get that. And the episode is The Power of Pause, Rediscovering My Passion. Here we go.
Look how far down the road I've come. And then allow your body to kind of recoup that energy. That's what I want to do in my business right now. That's what I want to do with this podcast right now. Is I want to take a little bit of time to just stop pushing forward, to sit back and go, look what I've accomplished, 4.5 years of this podcast. And how can I rebuild that energy and excitement to get back up and keep pushing forward again? So that's what this break is for. Again, I don't know exactly how long it's going to be, but more likely than not, it will not be very long because I really do enjoy this podcast and these episodes. It may come back rebranded with some new ideas or, some new intros and topics and things like that, but it will be coming back. So what I'm going to ask of you in this interim, in this break period, I want you to do a couple things for me if you don't mind.
All right, and there's the clip from Girl Beans Business.
Cliffhanger.
Wow.
Oh, it's
I
like the
kinda liked how it
end of an
ended.
era that we don't know,
Yeah.
we didn't even know existed.
What are we supposed to do?
This reminds me of a lot of the feedback we got when we first started doing suggested clips, and the AI would select a clip like that, and we'd say that sounds wrong. We should probably fix that. And people go, "No, I love that. It's like a cliffhanger. I love that you kept the important information out of the clip, and now people have to go listen to the full episode." So there you go. Is it a bug or a feature? You decide.
I'm immediately invested because like it's like opening up the end of a book and reading the last page, and you're like, how did we get here?
All right,
like
awesome.
Memento, what was that movie where everything's backwards?
Memento.
So I'm just trying to
Or
figure
there's
out
the
how we got
Seinfeld
here.
episode.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, so I'll just read a little bit about what this show is about. And we did get a cliffhanger clip. It sounds like the show's about to go on a little break. Read a little bit from this. Welcome to the Girl Means Business podcast, the ultimate destination for ambitious women looking to elevate their small business to new heights. Join your host, Kendra Swalls, a former teacher turned photographer and marketing expert, as she and her guests share invaluable insights and actionable strategies every week. So hopefully she's back soon from a break. It sounds like a great podcast. I would like to squeeze in one more. So let's get rolling and go back to the wheel.
It's going to be really tight.
Yeah, we can always stitch it if we need to, but...
Oh, this one. I'm not sure I can say this on this syndicated channel, but this show is called the Cottage WH asterisk.
I was also just thinking what a great boxing name Tony Mack is.
Yeah, let's talk about Tony Mack.
I sounded
this
tough.
is the Cottage Horrors podcast. That is going to say it. That's what it's called. The episode 33. We need to talk about Pelican Town. Let's listen to that clip.
I'm a little nervous.
You just brought that from Gus's bloody saloon, but I'll take it, I guess. Like, fine. I was like, you don't deserve this. I do so much for you, and all I get is like a recipe for like sushi, and I'm like, I know how to make sushi. It's on the TV. I don't even need you.
No, it is so wild how like you are basically the only one keeping this town alive. Like you are running everything. Also, you're the only one keeping the economy alive at this point, because why does it cost $100,000 to upgrade my house? What are you doing with that money? Because I had to bring you the supplies. I had to give you the wood to build this. So where is my money going? I would like to know.
I genuinely think, right, here's a conspiracy. I think Lewis killed your granddad. Because the old man wasn't because he was too old to be sustaining the farm, and he's like, nah, he's got to go. We got to bring in their like grandchild. We got to bring someone new into the farm.
Quick, we have 1 minute.
Interrupt.
Let's get your feedback.
I don't want to know what the podcast is about.
I
just
don't
want to
know.
Where
I'm
it
just
is.
going to subscribe.
Yeah, like
that was
What's
absolute
that
chaos.
Nintendo game? What is that? That
No,
everybody
it's
was
not
obsessed
Stardew
with?
Valley. It's not.
Animal.
It's not.
Yeah.
Animal Crossing. It's not any of that. It's something else, and I must know.
So the podcast is the Cottage Horrors podcast. Come join Scar, any pronouns, and Emily, she, her, as they host a podcast full of whimsy, wild, and whatever else every other Wednesday. It sounds like a bunch of funny friends talking, I guess.
I love it.
I love their
Yeah.
template. Nice looking template.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yep.
They sound lovely.
Yeah, that clip was chaos, and I want more of it.
I like the different accents too. Very nice. It's a
They
good
sound like
sonic
they get like a lot of fun to have
mishmash.
involved.
Yeah, I mean, I just imagine like I was somewhere between. They were talking about murder, and I felt like we were in some sort of very lush green, somewhere on the either Ireland or some Welsh country or Scotland. I don't know what accent I was hearing, but this podcast sounded really fun. It sounds like a nice group of people. You
Yeah,
can cut
I
that,
stand by the
I'm
fact that I
Despite
don't want to know what podcast was about. I just want it to live in mystery for me for as long as possible.
I'm
Like,
I'll read you the
dreaming about
description.
Pelican Town.
Well, before you do, Oliver, I just want to point out I might actually subscribe to it for automation just so I can continue to have zero context while I listen to it. Like, this is a new
Absolutely.
use case for automation.
The episode was actually about Stardew Valley.
Okay, makes sense.
Yep. That was one of my COVID divergences. I will admit, I was one of them was just building a tunnel in Minecraft, just a very long tunnel, and then a railway into it, tunnel to nowhere. It's kind of like, if you've seen The Shining, it's like sitting at the typewriter and just typing the same thing over and over. And then Stardew Valley was one too. It's a very good, rich game. I highly suggest you play it if you want to just forget about your obligations and family.
Yeah, It makes sense that was your pandemic hit too, because that Animal Crossing and like Harvest Moon was like everyone's pandemic fascination.
I made fudge. That was my
too.
pandemic thing.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. I'm looking through. Wait, we have some
cozy farm games.
I have a breaking news, everybody. I just scrolled through their episode list of the Cottage Shores podcast, and episode 32, which came out on August 23rd, says we've rebranded. This podcast used to be known as Horror and Humor, a chit-chat podcast is being retired. And we are now going to be known as the Cottage Shores podcast. So horror and humor actually sounds a lot. I mean, they were laughing. They were talking about murdering grandparents. I get it.
Yeah. That does seem like the context we needed. Also, what a 180 in title.
Yeah.
Just saying. It's great, but
yeah, definitely going for shock value.
Yeah.
Nice.
Which is, I guess it worked. We picked it. Well, the wheel picked it, but we put it in the wheel.
All.
The wheel loves horror.
So everyone, yeah, I mean, I thought this new format at the end was fun. Maybe we'll expand it next week and do a whole episode of these. What do you all think about that?
That sounds great.
I like it. Meta.
Yeah.
Podcast about podcasts featuring podcasts.
That's right. And then the wheel, I didn't mention, it has 13 on it. So I'm going to take the 3 that we have off the wheel, and I'm going to add in some new ones. And we'll just work our way through the 450 submissions until we get to 0.
Does that mean you have set up automations for every single one until we pick it?
No, that would be ludicrous. I only set up ones that are on the wheel. So I have set up 13, and now I'm going to turn off the automations for the ones we've picked. Put in some new ones.
Fun.
Podcast Zero. I just got to zoom in on this. Podcast Zero is such a funny concept, and I can totally imagine one of those like hyper productive podcatchers that are like all about expediting knowledge and whatever, doing a Podcast Zero campaign, and I think it's hilarious, and it's everything that's opposite with how I listen to podcasts. But those people are out there who are trying to get to Podcast Zero.
I'm gonna make a T-shirt of that, like Podcast Zero T-shirt, and add it to the merch.
My brain went in a completely different direction from you, Max. I thought of Podcast Zero as like something you say when you're selling a car, like zero emissions. This podcast is eco-friendly.
I thought of it as the first one. I thought of it as like Patient Zero.
Yeah.
This is where the podcast.
No, this is where
it all
This
began.
is the first podcast.
You guys
Max
with
is
Inbox Zero, right?
Yeah, Max nailed exactly what I was thinking when I said it. I like the other interpretations. Podcast Zero would be David Weiner's podcast, probably, or Evo Terra. Also, I believe is like potentially up in the running as Podcast Zero.
Wait, as like the Patient Zero, or we?
Sorry. Now we have 3 potential zeros, but yeah, the initial.
I feel like Adam Curry is the undisputed Podcast Zero.
What is?
Adam Curry's podcast, but I guess maybe that's controversial, but that's what I've heard.
Shout out Evo Terra though of him.
Yeah, he's like maybe he's podcast 6. I don't know. I think Max.
He's in the top 10.
No,
We're honing in on Podcast Zero.
With the interpretation I had was like Inbox Zero, which is like you're trying to get through all your emails, so you get to 0 emails in your inbox, and people trying to get to Podcast Zero are the people who are doing it, listening on 3x, which is, I just think it's a different world, It's not my
3x is a very humble number, Max. At
4x.
least double digits.
Yeah, 10x listening to podcasts. Gotta get
if it doesn't sound like Alvin and the Chipmunks, you won't hit Podcast Zero.
All right, everyone, that concludes another episode of the Headliner PodPod. After 3 episodes, we're playing with the format and we're enjoying ourselves. And until next time, stay safe, and remember, always brush your teeth before you hit record.